Thank you so much as well for covering all of this and inviting me to this challenging and interesting and I think necessary program that you helped to bring to the go here. I think it is a needed program here. I see that there is a lot of good young art and art of all generations that has been developing during the last 30 years in Kiev, and the scene is getting richer and richer. But what I see as well is that there is kind of a lack of representation of that. Be it in an institutional framework that would have created something like a public, not a private Center for Contemporary Art, be it a political initiative to really create something like a museum here. So I see that there is a lot of voids that sometimes make it a bit complicated for artists to represent their work properly and to talk out loudly to the world. So I think it is very important to have that kind of initiative that allows artists to step away from the burden of making their everyday living in a complicated economic surrounding that is, well, maybe developing, but still does not allow opportunity for everybody to properly work within something like an institutional coined network. So I think this is a beautiful initiative, and I hope that it will grow and have a sustainable future here. That's what I wanted to say to that, what has welcomed me and what has invited me. Maybe I will now have to disappoint you 2 or 3 times. I have considered what to do tonight, and the first consideration was that I'm really giving a lecture, but I thought a lecture is not appropriate in that type of surrounding where everything is about work in process, going like working, like trying to assemble, like trying to recapitulate, like trying to really work things and problematics through. So I thought I should open up as well a bit and just extemporate on that how I feel the current, and I'll try to do that from a perspective that is a skeptical perspective, I have to say. And I will maybe show some images, but who has expected images from the very current business of the art world will be disappointed. The images will be grayish, will be old, will be coming out of another continent, will be showing practices that are almost forgotten or are just at the horizon of being evaluated and brought back to a debate. I gave the talk, that's the second maybe disappointment, quite an opaque title, which is a question. I mean, the question is not always good for a talk, because of a talk always tries to propose a figure of thought and to propose something firm and something not skeptical. But I pose this question, and this question is, why curate the world? What does this question mean for me? Actually, I have quite a long history in curating and in reflecting, which comes with my age. And I have seen quite some developments that are astonishingly parallel to developments that I've seen already before. Let's say at the dawn of the 70s and early 80s, it's similar developments that I'm I'm seeing today. I'm seeing an art world that imagines to be an art world, but it's split into very, very different narratives and very different art worlds, I would say. I'm seeing I'm seeing agents that are homogenizing, and I'm seeing agents that are localizing. I'm seeing something like a nationalization of certain discourses, and as it is obvious, I'm seeing opportunities shrinking and growing in one. When we think about the art world nowadays, what would we think about? We would think about an international art world that is a shiny art world, that is an art world that has nothing to do any longer, so to say, with the practices that most of you might be engaged with, but it is a world of more or less fashion design. And that is a change that happened within the last, let's say, 30 years. That the art world, architecture had gone through that already in the 80s, I would say, with postmodernity. That the art world that usually is covered, the glossy art world that usually is covered and that is reproduced and re-reproduced, is an art world that has much more to do with the creation of a lifestyle for a certain international community that, in times of high modernism and late modernism, had not been linked to the art world at all. It is an art world where international collectors and their marketplaces and the respective institutions that are linked to this milieu create themselves a certain security of being an international class that can exchange international values. It's an art world where, so to say, the good of the art is something that allows, like the house, like the boat, like the a manison that you own, you to collect in certain values that do not just represent, as in old collections, the will, the gaze, the taste of a collector, or just the will that something might get profit on one of the most irrational markets that exist in the world, because if there is no real value-making process behind it, but the totally symbolic value-making process of collecting and representing, where machinery is working around. So you see an exchange of, so to say, global values. So you see a lot of international businessmen and the so-called elite, the elite of money, that is really investing into art worlds. And you see the transformation of the institutions that come with it. Yeah? You see that the art fair that used to be a marketplace in between, so to say, the critic, the museum, and the knowledgeable collector, now transformed into something totally different. A world globalizing and concentrating machinery of a value trade, actually, that is, so to say, assuring the taste of a certain elite through a stardom of arts and the pushing of fashions and names that are coming with that methodology. You see a concentration of galleries that we did not see before. You see a concentration of the market, and you see a concentration of so to say, the agents. So you have really a split of the art, of the machinery that had developed in the so-called high and late modernism, or in early postmodernity, to that new type of economic machine that is self-sustaining and creates its own values that sometimes are really apart from values of that what you as producers of art or as receivers of art would expect. So you see this international model really governing the world. It is a model that is almost living separately from the old value-making machines, like have been the classical gallery, commercial or non-commercial gallery that produced with artists and put them on a market, like the classical museum of modern or contemporary art that made thematical shows, like the classical biennials, which was a competition, so to say, of national neutron or internationality. You see this as the domineering, so to say, world if we talk about value making and name making in the art world. But beyond that, there is totally different art worlds living, and they are living in a different manner. There is, for instance, the world of the biennials. The world of the biennials is not at all any longer really in parallel with that art world that is the art world of the so-called neoliberal fashion machinery of re-evaluating lifestyles for an international class. It is, so to say, the refugium where the old art as a knowledge production machine and contemporary art as something that would have been linked to the so-called third space of society would have been developing. It is the refugium for curators and for artists that work in a different way. Biennials started, and the boom of biennials started like, I would say, 20 years ago. Yeah? We had a few reigning models of biennials that have been that had a long tradition. Venice for over 100 years, but then there have been counter biennials to that. You had the Biennale in Sao Paulo, for instance, which was a very important biennial to so to say reflect the South in a way. You had other biennials which have been had a long tradition, which came out of the international idea of a global modernity that would come with late modernism, like the Biennial of Paris for a long time, which was really for a long time till the mid-80s a meeting place even of the two competing hemispheres or the three competing hemispheres that then governed the world in the still split world of the Cold War period and the non-aligned movement in between that, of the Western world, the so-called socialist world, and the non-aligned movement between that. The Paris Biennial created something like a space in between, an open meeting space mainly for the avant-gardes of the so-called neo-avant-garde that started in the 60s, when artists really have been starting to challenge the whole system of representation and the triangle of critique, museum, and the idea of the artwork as the masterpiece, and looked behind, so to say, the production machine of that, and uncovered the production machine in the terms of conceptual art and experimental art and institutional critical art in the 1960s and early 70s. Yeah? So I think that the biennial world is the inheritor of that system. Yeah, it is the inheritor of that system in a lot of ways, and it is linked to two main motives. It is linked to the will of local politicians on the one hand, in terms of city marketing to make themselves part of that international shows that of that international value tourism circuit that the biennials bring with it. And on the other hand, it is the intervention of new figures that came out of the old system in the 70s and early 80s, namely the free curators. Yeah? The free curators is a class that sometimes mingles in between the worlds. So the first world that I described needs the free curator as the value maker. So you would see on any of these international biennials that are just about to market, you would see a lot of curators doing jobs in evaluating, so to say, in doing special shows, special programs, bringing, so to say, the bone of regional knowledge with them and displaying, so to say, value that is an immaterial value to the world. But in the business of biennials, these curators have to do something different. Because of biennials usually have two different forms. Yeah? One is the big biennial that has its tradition and that can talk to a wider region. This big biennial, be it Guangzhou, be it Istanbul, be it Sao Paulo, be it Cuba, be it name 10 of them, you all know the names of them. Yeah? They usually attract Berlin Biennale or whatsoever. Yeah? They usually attract to find, so to say, hot, like in the fashion world, hot trend crowds, yeah? Trend scouts, to go to the local scene and to work out a display between something that is for the needs of the local scenes and something international. And you see the professional of the free curator in a different manner or in a different level, which is the free curator that is the specialist on biennials. Yeah? So that is always invited to do biennials because of people understand that he is a good biennial maker. You could name at least 10 or 15 of them immediately if you think about that. Yeah? This international biennial maker and the new trend scouts serve in the big biennials usually another need because of they have to back up their global knowledges, yeah, with local, so to say, surroundings or with the specific of the locality. So they would go, and I don't exclude myself here. In a way, we would look at the space, look at the local scene, and excavate something or bring something into a debate with each other. And we bring this into debate by knowing that in some of the cities there is not even an infrastructure that would hold that longer than for the biennial, and that the biennial is the spot of desire and the spot of knowledge production as such. Yeah? Smaller biennials that are usually in smaller cities that are newly founded, have a different perspective mostly. They and their respective, so to say, funding public, be it the public hand or be it a private hand, expect to bring the big names of the big art world, to bring the hot shots, so to say, to here and into conversation with the local scene. So the needs of the smaller biennial is a different one. So you have two different systems of biennials working. The one is the one that is localizing and it's grounding, always criticized by the local scenes, because of the local scenes understand very well that it is a selection process and it will not help them very long, and it will not cure their need for long-term production whatsoever possibilities, and for being again trapped in the in the power plays of the local art worlds. Yeah? Various international show-up of the smaller biennials, or that ones that want to get something, does not sustain at all, because of it usually brings either international artists, or it brings the so-called biennial artist that goes to somewhere, does local research for the moment, detects a local issue, works around the local issue, displays the local issue with research, and then makes a work on it that is going to the biennial and sold again. Nevertheless, I think that without this world of biennials, we would not know so much about each other than we do know. Because of, there is the third thing. We have museums and Kunsthalle and artists' exhibition places around the world who usually, if they're not one of the big shots, and we can count the big shots like on one hand, yeah, do neither have the financial capacity to really do that, what the biennial can do, nor do they have the institutional power of representation that they would create that kind of same ideology of attraction, I would say, yeah? Attention and attraction that the biennial does. And what we see more and more, and you see it in the Western world, that these museums are in a trap as well. Because of certain disbalances in the museums and in the art world. Most of them in the Western world, at least in Europe, are publicly funded, and the public funds have their own ideas about what a museum would be, and it's ideas of audience numbers, it's ideas of easy accessibility, it's ideas of bringing people to the place, and it's ideas of representation of the power place of the local scenes usually. So what you mostly see in these museums is done under that kind of area. Though it's a very woodcut table that I try to draw, but I think that there is some reality behind that. Since the celebration of American independence in 1992, with this short period where the US museums thought that it is time to really reconsider the multivocality of their of the states, we see a different thing. We see the need of artscapes that have been not represented to enter, so to say, the canons. And what we see as well is that during the last 20 years, the so-called Western canons that held the world together, the art world together, at least in the eyes of the Western art world, that was the domineering art world, because of nobody did know anything about the so-called Eastern art world or the so-called Southern art world, besides in these biennials, I would say. This methodology started to fade out because of you saw new actors on the place. And I think this effect of the 1992 anniversary that came with a new conceptualization and the remembrance of Western artists of this generation, in the generation of the 60s that had reconsidered the status of the institution and the art world, and that started to repoliticize the art practice, the so-called neo-conceptual generation of the early 90s, they started actually to corrode that old canonical. They started to corrode that old canonical system. And from that on, the biennials got a different task to hold, and some of the institutions and some of the artists-run institutions of the West suddenly understood that the world in that way had to be widened, had to be changed, and that it was a world of representation that went via certain ideological, methodological, representational paradigms actually that would not longer fit into the more widened and open space. And this as well was coming with a theoretical approach that mainly came from the so-called free groups that have been of university people gathering around certain journals or gathering around certain university courses that opened that field up and debated that new idea of inclusion of otherness. It was the first call. The first call actually came from women. Came from women in the 70s. They really accused the art world that it was a purely male-dominated world, and raised their voice against it in the American field, and it started as well from the US, I would say. Okay, but then geopolitical ruptures came, and these geopolitical ruptures have not been without any consequences for the ruptures in the art world, not just for the biennial market, as well for the, so to say, more and more through the dominance of a neoliberal worldwide economy, through the declining, so to say, of the national industry and the power of the nation to control the flow of money any longer. So there was this economical globalization on the one hand. On the other hand, there was the fall of the so-called Iron Curtain and dissolution of the socialist world. And what we saw there was similar to that what one could see with the women raising their voice against being excluded from the mid-70s on. We saw suddenly an Eastern Europe on the horizon. It was covered even, you know, because of in the same period when Eastern Europe opened up, the gazes of the world have been on the Gulf. Because of it was the first video war that we have been witnessing that was parallel to the opening and the fall of the Berlin Wall. The fall of the Berlin Wall was something that was broadcast worldwide, but the first, so to say, arrival of international TV and of a reality of the war that we could not really imagine, namely the so-called intelligent war without troops, happened in Iran and Iraq in the first war. You all remember, maybe, or have seen in your history lessons, the one cruise missile that is going into a house, a shelter in Kuwait. Even Saddam Hussein said, "I saw it first on CNN." So suddenly there was this virtuality that covered a bit the wild breakup of the East. Yeah? But what happened in the East, especially in Eastern Europe, that was not Russia, was that there have been, so to say, conquerors of the new continent arriving, yeah? Curators. I remember that I saw the first show of Ilya Kabakov, 1991, in Basel, in the Art Museum in Basel. And Is it very boring? Pose me questions. I think I have to do that. Because of people are leaving and leaving and leaving because of the expected images. Okay, I'm going to show. I'm going to show images later. So whoever wants to pose a question, please do it now. Otherwise, I won't stop talking that way. So please intervene. I think it is necessary to understand the current to go a bit deeper into that type of fractions. Yeah? And it was like a trophy shop of the East. Yeah? So now we are showing the war trophies of the East to the Western curators and saying, hey, there has been a totally hidden continent, govern it, and explore it. Yeah? And there has been an initiative that immediately understood that this could be done by the benevolent investor George Soros, who thought, well, there is something that we have to explore, so I create something like a system of teaching institutions, research institutions, and arts institutions, the so-called SCCAs, the Soros Centers of Contemporary Art, yeah? Which have been implementing all the discourses of postmodernity into local scenes that have sometimes not even been prepared for that discourses. But what these people did as well, they suddenly formulated an entity that never did exist before, the so-called East. The so-called East was a mere phantasma, even in the socialist years. So in the socialist years, it might have been easier to display something in Poland in the 80s, like critical practice, than, for instance, in the ultra-conservative Austria. Poland did not much, the Polish art scene did not much know what the Czechoslovak art scene was doing. The Czechoslovak art scene did not have a chance to travel to Bulgaria. They traveled maybe to the GDR or to Poland if they could. So it was a very opaque continent with totally different niveaus of contemporary art. But artists immediately understood that they had a power in that hand. They had a power that there was a West they always wanted to relate to, or to talk back to, or to be accepted by, and they stated that we are the East. This was totally a phantasma. This East never existed, but started to exist as a powerful entity, and it still exists in the heads of the. There is a truth that the absence of the Western system of art homogenized the space, but the practices and the allowances of practices have been totally different in every country. Yeah, and but this was a tactical maneuver that up to now works. There was an appearance of the East suddenly, but the East was unlucky because other regions started to do the same. Suddenly, almost not much longer than a decade later, it was the Arab world, which was the same, or the so-called Middle Eastern world, which was the same. Suddenly we had Arab world art coming as well with some civic movements, which has been never existing before, but it was a mere heuristic fantasy. And the international institutions started to work with that. Sometimes late, sometimes soon, but sometimes started to work with that and harvested that in. So you could see groups of museums curators from the Tate going to the Arab world and buying in, making one show of the harvests and then going out again. But all of this happened partly without that what the real artistic troubles have been. So how to counter that? How to really work against that? To work against that, the artists that had been still marginalized and curators that had an interest really in working with people found the idea of the local specificity, I would say, of the specificity of the local. So to really dig deeper into so to say local histories, yeah, which was good because of that entitled research that entitled curators, local curators, really to work things through. But this got globalized on a different way. And that's why we curate the world now. Yeah? Look, there are certain schools and curatorial courses around in the world all of you want to go. Be it the Goldsmiths College, be it the Bard College, be it the Whitney course, be it the Rijksakademie course or whatsoever. Yeah? No art academy in the West, or no better art academy any longer could afford to live without an international bunch of students. Yeah? So things started to mingle, and what was the point of reference that it mingled? We saw the professionalization of two fields. The one was the cultural manager, or the cultural manager. There are so many courses in cultural management around the world that everybody wants to do, feeding, so to say, the first and the second industry. And the other was the curator, the local curator that is internationally trained. Yeah. And the local curator that is internationally trained on this marketplace of international training was somehow forced by people that understood that there is marginalization, and marginalization has to be lifted, and by a theory that was going against that, was forced to bring something in to that arena. And what was brought in often was the work of artists of older generations from at home, who lived in totally different circles. So suddenly we saw an exchange of knowledge on the curatorial field. Yeah? That was, again, artificial because of it was on an international display and did not really help to clear up that what is complicated at home. So be aware, if you ever want to go there, the methodology that you learn might not be a methodology that allows you to deal with the local very specific, but it might be an international methodology that you apply to the local to learn a dialect of curating or a dialect of representation that would allow you to exchange. Young curators do that. I do not have to mention that things then in the last 5, 7, 10 years changed through the appearance of global and international media, of the Instagram and the social media world, but that's a different story. So that's, I think, where we are. People stay marginalized. People do have at home sometimes bad production means. People are getting invited from the margins. People are seen from the margins. People are exhibited from the margins. It's even so that without, so to say, metabolizing these people, like digesting and metabolizing these positions, no international show or no reliable practice can be taken seriously in these art worlds. I do not punish that. I just try to sketch what happened. And what I think is that there is a lot of good-willing translation from one to each other, which creates that air of a global art world. And I always say this global art world never exists because of, as it is with traveling, the passport matters, yeah? As it is with, so is it with art. The locality that you're stuck in and the power relations of that reality that you're stuck in, they are really important for you. You can achieve an international career, but you always have to see that you are part of the transmission agency that is going on in this respect. Anyway, I don't have a cure for that. I think the only thing that I can, I thought another thing, and I told it in an interview today, that there is something that is as well coming with that thing, which is the master discourse. Yeah? A lot of local scenes have their own points of references. It's always a cluster of people, of exchange, of working against hierarchies or being above in the hierarchy of suppression and oppression. It's always kind of a power game where money is involved, but symbolic values are as well involved, and possibilities of representation are involved. But there is always scenes which evaluate what is good local. Yeah? So that is, for instance, which you can trust. They edit somehow. You all are such a scene that edits the local discourse. Because if you talk about it, you talk about the power relations, you immediately can tell me what hand I should not shake if I come here, because of it is the wrong hand, and this hand is a dirty hand because of this and this. And I always maybe shake the wrong hand as I come here as an international curator. So it's very hard to see what locally really is happening for an international curator. So there has been some transmission agencies, which is fashion for sure, which is certain methodologies of producing art, which is always in international because of artists are always organizing themselves of an international way, and which is the agents that bring it on an international horizon, be it curators, be it shows, be it the international market. Yeah? So this is always a trap. But if we go more to the, so to say, alternative field, we need a system of evaluation and re-evaluation as well. And this is this, I have learned that for 3 generations that I have witnessed, and I told this is in an interview I've already said, we need the master discourse. So we need the master quote and we need the master reference. So all of us go through really good thinkers, yeah? But the triangle stays the same. The local discourse may be very original, may be really deep, but it is not translated, so it cannot get hegemonical. It is just when a point comes that there is a governance and the stream is going to the right way. Yeah? How long have African thinkers been suppressed if they did not formulate like in a Pan-African movement or in an anti-colonial movement? But now we see suddenly African thinkers like Achille Mbembe or others, yeah, that we quote. But there is always a master discourse behind that, which is a triangle, so that you, coming from all of us, and this is true for the Western and any art works, that does seem to be a center. We always have to have a point of reference. It's always a triangle. Via that we have to relate. There is always means via that we have to translate. Be it the normality of form, how a contemporary exhibition should look like, but as well the master discourse. And the master discourse creates slaves in us, because of sometimes it does not allow us to trust our own thinking. It's good if we don't trust in our own thinking, because of our own thinking is embedded into hegemonies. But the master discourse eradicates a lot of differentiations that are vividly and good enough to be read and to be listened at and to be heard at. So all of you are editors of the local scene, yeah? That's what I want to say. It's nothing that you're just marginalized. All your debates about knowing who is in the power and why, who is in the power and why you could not, and so on, is not just false. It is very right because of it challenges the normality of the systems. But on the other hand, you have a good in hand that you have to translate suddenly. If it comes to the international, in the international field, you have to translate. And what is the motive of translating? It might be a stream of intellectual fashion. It's not nothing to say about intellectual fashion. Yeah? It's good because of it creates emerging scenes that can talk against something. What I'm just challenging is that there is always a mastership and a slave relation in most of our in most of our things. How to get rid of that? I don't have really a clue. So it's always a question mark, an exclamation mark, and then there is a plus, and the plus is the open space where hegemony unfolds in these different art worlds that I try to sketch out. It's like in the famous Lavrska Str movie, where suddenly the movie stops and strange graphs come that talk for the opaque world. In Slovakia, after 1970, after you who are young might not know, that the socialist world had 2 or 3 times when it thought that it could reconsider itself again to something like the initial idea of being collective, being self-organized, being to the people. And one of these ideas was the so-called Prague Spring in 1968. And you may have learned in school that this was just a short spring of the possibility of renovating a socialist government, and it even was excused, it's now excused by hardcore leftists as being just a revanchist liberalism, but nevertheless it created hope and it created a lot of positive art scene, so that the neo-avant-garde that had been hiding for a long time in the flats and so on suddenly got display. But the tanks of the Warsaw Pact came in, tore it down, and Jan Palach burned on the 21st of August 1968 on the Wenzler's place in Prague. And in the same period, Poland opened up, and Prague totally closed down to an almost Stalinist system. Even a video camera was not easy to get in the 70s because of it was dangerous. Copy machines was dangerous. All this existed in Poland, in the socialist Poland and whatsoever. So, for artists, what would this mean? On the one hand, there was the possibility to speak out loudly like a dissident, yeah? Saying I'm a dissident, but the dissident often spoke to the West. Yeah? Often, sometimes. But there has been some practices that tried to navigate in a complicated way around this situation. One among them was famous artist Julius Koller, now getting rediscovered by the international art world for his strange conceptualism. What Julius would do, he would act out almost private actions, almost private actions to nobody, just to state that there is an alternative. And on the other hand, he would collect all the visible evidence that he could collect around the world, about the world around him. So he had an archive of all the publications that have been circulating around. He was notating, he was working it through, and he was trying to create a world out of the system of the world that would transform this system into another register that would allow to talk about oppression without talking about just as a dissident, but with really having evidence of the world. And Julius, at the point, then would walk up to the chimney of his house, would go out, make this strange action with the ping pong, and would disappear. And when he was asked to commission to take part in the competition for a monument, a socialist monument in a satellite town or a microrayon in the outskirts of Bratislava, he would put this into the competition. A ping pong, a mega pop ping pong player. Why did he so? Because of 1969, when it was clear that everything would go down, he said we have to, he accused his colleagues that have been doing neo-avant-garde, formalist, Western style conceptualisms. He said, well, you're just serving the power, they can do it away. There is no way to do art at all. Let's play ping pong. Let's play table tennis. And so he invited the artists and the general audience to play table tennis with him, because he said, we don't have any fixed rule. This is a play that has rules, and there can be justice in this play because of the play has rules, and we just play around that. We play ping pong, and this ping pong and this stating to play ping pong in the gallery is a highly political statement, because of we play against the will of power. We play a free game, and we engage, so to say, in community. So he used this motif of the ping pong often, and he put another of his competitors into the ring, which was Stano Filko, another of the persons that lived in Bratislava at that moment. And Stano decided to 1971 to declare the week between the 1st and the 8th of October. You know what this week is here, yeah? As the conceptual week of conceptual art, and to declare all the actions that have been done by the party and the communist cadres as an enormous art piece. So he really declared it as an enormous art piece. Another figure that tried to transmogrify around this was famous Romanian artist Ion Grigorescu. Yeah? Romania was probably the most oppressive landscape that you could live in the 1970s, in the late 1970s, because of you neither could trust your best friends nor your family, because of there was a system of spying, oppression, and really you could not open more or less a book without thinking. What Jan at that point did was that he thought the only thing that is possible is I'm torn back to my body, yeah? And my body is written in another tradition that I have, which is a Nietzsche tradition, a tradition of reading the famous philosopher Nietzsche, and a tradition of Orthodox religion, which allows me to transubstantialize my body and make my body something like a figure of the outside that is embedded into light, and this light and the body in the light, and this tradition, which is oppressed, would allow me to perform something like an authority that is not politically, so to say, immediately a statement, but is an opaque statement that everybody could read. So he would go to the countryside and perform games as well. And all these games have to do with mythological figures. Yeah? And all these games pointed at dictatorship, but in a very symbolic way. So this is not just a guy jumping with a tool over a river, but it is St. George who is trying to kill the dragon of dictatorship in that way, that this free movement was then declared as art, as an art movement, as a performative move, and declared against, so to say, the normality of art as art piece, to create a free space. I would say to create a free space for thinking that would be incommensurable, that would be out of all of that rituals. Moscow conceptualism partly did the same, but with a much more orthodox, so to say, and male strategy to perform something that was incommensurable, that had its symbolic logic, that allowed art to act freely and pose another system that would respond in a way to society, but not in that immediate way. I think that some of so-called alternative practices, drug practices, practices of people that are really in mental bad state, that are formating communities at the moment, punk movements and so on, they are trying to do the same thing against the regularity of the discursivity. They are trying to make something that open up a space and be the mind space of torture or of self-torture, which is for me a very artistic space, I have to say, which never can be commodified, because of it is a practice that is not about commodification at all, but it is a practice of the direct understanding of radical subjectivity and living. So that's what they did. But what they did was they did it with the means of art and with a symbolic reference that would allow them to invite that into an artistic practice, to name it an artistic practice, to really take the history and methodology of art seriously, but to step beside to create a space of free action. Yeah? Another space. You see, and he even masks it, then now you can see him as George killing the dragon, yeah? On the left, on the right-hand side. And he photoed it, he documented it, he collaged it, he put it on papers, and now it's getting re-evaluated. Another figure is Jerzy Kowanda in Czech Republic. He was working in, and now he's quite a famous contemporary artist, a good sculptor and a good maker of totally funny performances, but he would trickster his colleagues with other methodologies. He would, for instance, in the years where oppression started to be really hard, yeah, and there was the field of performative art around, he would, for instance, do performances like, I invite my friends to go to the square, and immediately when they meet and gather, I run away. Or I would move my body on the spiral staircase, on the rolling staircase, yeah? I would just turn my body and look into the faces of people. Or I would try to get people as close that they feel uncomfortable and they feel the pressure of me as a person. You see it on the staircase. This was the action. He was just turning around and going up the wrong side and looking into the face of the people. This is another beautiful action that I like. It's a comment on the dissidents and on the milieu that always gazed on the West, which is he's sitting in front of a telephone line, and the performance is called "I'm Waiting for Somebody to Call Me," which never then really happened. It happened just in the late 80s that Western curators really get attentive to that practices. Or he would do sculptures, minimalist sculptures, land art sculptures, but Landart sculptures and minimalist sculptures with a very small duration. So he would go to the St. Charles Bridge and build a pyramid like Carl André or others, a pyramid of salt, and the next rain would wash it away. Or he would use sugar cubes to create a minimalist sculpture, but they would melt away. But the space of possible negotiation in between was open for a very moment. And I think all what we are having, because we are embedded in all these discursitivities and all the structures that I tried to sketch out very woodcut in the beginning, is that we can create that space. For me, this is part of the art world and part of art thinking. The other thing is, and that would be another lecture, why I like rhetorically, formally, precise and good international museums art as well, but I won't tell you now. Thank you. Okay. Questions, answers, concerns? Shout at me. Okay. No questions, no concerns. Yeah.
Who's the person who saw the biggest amount of art in the world?
Sorry?
Who is the person who saw the biggest amount of art in the world?
Who owns the biggest amount of art in the world?
Who is the person who saw the biggest amount of art in the world?
Sold. Who sold the biggest amount of art in the world? Very likely the Gagosian Empire, or Hauser and Wirth, or one of the big traders, or maybe, I don't know. For me, sales doesn't matter.
I don't know about sales, but I have seen, just seen.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I get it. Thanks. Yeah?
You're going to make an exhibition in Ukraine, more
exhibitions? Yeah, I'm going to make an exhibition about a totally different subject, which is Soviet architecture and the Soviet city and the disappearance and the afterlife of the Soviet city. That's going to be opening in end of June or beginning of September. It's not fully decided, but it's a project, I think, of some relevance here as well, because of a lot of the masterpieces of that period are abandoned, getting destroyed, partly not renovatable because of their under ideological scrutiny or under the wild forces of the development market of building and money washing. So I'm trying to remember another idea, not just, so to say, the colonial aspects of that modernity, but the emancipatory aspects of that modernity, and an idea of another living together, because if I see a lot of motifs, especially in early socialist architecture, that are getting more and more important in trying to solve, so to say, the living together reconsideration in the world, shared spaces, actually more collectivity, and so on and so on. And I think this is a thing that especially, and real estate that is sustainably working in this, the models have been developed in these cities. Unfortunately, and it's a real continent. So I'm going to do a show on this, and I would like to curate a show here, yeah, for sure, but we already did, first of all. This is the first Kiev Biennial, so it's maybe not necessary to have us once more, because of we already displayed, but I'm still following the practices that are coming from here, I would say. I'm really curious, and there is a friendship that has been developing through that curating, and that's the most precious thing, I would say. Friendship, with friendship comes knowledge.
Could you tell us, please, what Ukrainian artists?
The acoustics is so bad here, and
Yes.
and I'm almost deaf.
Could you tell us, please, what Ukrainian artist you are inspired with?
If you leave away the word Ukrainian, that I don't have to respond to the Ukrainianness, I'm fine telling you why certain practices are of interest of me and may they be localized and dealing with local issues. But as soon as the nation is on the horizon and then the identity building of the nation and the Ukrainianness, I would rather not try to go on that ice. That is for someone else, but I can see a lot of practices that really interest me, that are dealing with subjects that come from this cluster and community and of the world that are specific. So I really can tell you, but I won't tell names now. You must allow me not to.
You talk about curator courses and what it was meant to be curator and what are the other ones?
Sorry?
You talked about curator courses and what are the other ones? You can be curator and what would you mean?
Ways to become a curator except
Curatorial schools?
Courses and schools, yes.
Yeah, there are ways.
What would you recommend?
For instance, you know, curate. Curate. Yeah? You know, we have a lot of curators that are coming out of self-organized. I think the best way is that you feel something is missing here. And I want to do something that is missing because of it's not existing, so I create my own space for that. You can do it with a magazine. It's not always that you have to look around and to search or to research, but you can state that something is really missing and something is needed, and you create it and you say, I curate around that because of I feel for myself that I feel a bit bored and something is missing. So for instance, we founded our magazine. We found that in the German-speaking world certain discourses are not reflected, and we want to read them in our language. Because of it's always strange to read them in French, or strange to read them in Italian, or strange to read them in English. So we started to translate and to commission, because of we found a void that we wanted to fill. And organize yourself and curate. That's a way of getting curator. I see a lot of some international curators that really went through that school, that are not trained at all. And sometimes their methodologies are even fresher than the trained ones, out of interest. Even very, very prominent curators of the mid-generation, of the younger generation, come out of groups, of discursive groups, or of groups that feel a relevance of a theme that they wanna work around, and this gets then internationally found by the other headhunting curators and allows you to curate. But please, the best thing to get a curator is curate together with artists. You can learn some methodologies for sure, and you must know the normality of the art world. You should never curate naively. You must be informed somehow, and you must know what you want to do and against whom or what void you want to fill up. But then the best thing is to start the practice and not to wait till somebody invites you to start the practice, or not to wait till somebody educates you to start the practice. You just start the practice and you'll see. I'm not a trained curator at all. I don't have a university degree at all. I never can teach at the university because of the universities will not allow me to teach because of I would have to have gone through the master, the PhD, and the habilitation. Otherwise I cannot teach, so I never will teach at the university, which is good, I think, or bad. Sometimes I feel that there is something missing because of, you know, it is not just that you can learn everything. Disciplines have a long history, and so has the discipline of art and art exhibiting. It has a long history, so it created a methodology. And to just tear all of this apart and say, I start from scratch, you must be very strong and have a very strong vision, because of it might be through the back door that this history hits back to you. Disciplinarity is something that is not bad. Sometimes I really am sad that I did not work through one philosophical paradigm or one art historical paradigm to the scratch to make myself free from it, but to be able to go back to a reference. It's always a bit of slippery ground if you don't have that. And you have to acknowledge that there is disciplinarity. There is a history of disciplines. I talked about it yesterday somewhere, that if you talk about with a documentary filmmaker about documentary film, and if you talk with an artist who is doing a documentary about documentary film, it would be different answers, because of the documentary filmmaker has a history of documentary filmmaking. There is a theory of documentary filmmaking. There is a theory what the camera does with the gaze, what the gaze does with the camera, what you have to do, and so on and so on. The artists maybe don't have this theory, and sometimes these worlds are farther from each other, though they seem so near, through their disciplinarity or through that where they come from. So there sometimes it's harder to bring a documentary filmmaker hardcore and an artist that is doing a documentary together to one path than other transdisciplinarities. So I think it is always the discipline that eats you back as well, and you have to know. Without knowledge, I think totally naive, that must be very strong. Yeah?
Hello, thank you for your talk. It was very interesting. I have two separate, very brief questions. One is connected to your exhibition you just mentioned about the architecture, Soviet architecture. Is it going to be something related to a particular city or like a particular town, or is it going to
No, it's covering the whole Soviet empire.
One in Vienna, or are you planning
The one in Vienna, I was part of that. It stemmed from a research that we, a group of people, and people from Ukraine as well, then younger than now, have put together, and the Vienna Architectural Center then asked the curatorial team to work with that research. So that was...
But the one that is supposed to be in, you were referring to one in summer, in June, July?
Yeah, it is a part of that research, done by research groups from the respective regions, and stemming from a research that we initiated, a group of enthusiasts like 15 years ago, 20 years ago. But it's still the same milieu. A lot of things have happened. It's the same with art history. A lot of things have happened.
The reason I'm asking is just...
Sometimes you don't even feel the need. For instance, I not longer feel the need to really talk about Eastern European art or whatsoever, about the history. I just showed you a few examples, but that was for an argument that I wanted to pose, because there is a lot of local research and a lot of local art history who works it through in a more prominent. I would like to make punctuations, but there was a time like 20 years ago where I felt the need to talk about that, to talk about certain figures that are oppressed by hegemonies, because of the old nomenclature of art history did not take care. But now there is so much good research around and so much written around that I do not feel the need any longer to engage in that. Yeah? So that's another thing, yeah? And it's the same a bit with the Soviet architecture. I just feel the urge to reiterate some thematical things that happened there that might speak to the current, and on the other hand, I feel the urge to talk about another use of space that is not just evaluated through real estate practices, but through a different notion of speciality, public and living, yeah. And I think the third thing is that a lot of these things are either via revanchist nationalisms or through a booming real estate industry are in danger, and we have to keep the memory of these things. Some of them need monument protection, they really need monument protection. Eh? But it's not just a thing that happens in Eastern Europe. I mean, they tore down the Penn Station in New York, which was a masterpiece of brutalist architecture. So that's going on everywhere, and it's a history of a certain form of modernism that we have to keep like we have to keep Baroque churches. Yeah? That's another issue. And I find this modernism pretty interesting because it is a paramodernism that lived in a different idea of space. Yeah? I mean, space in Western modernism from the 70s on was totally economized space. Yeah? But till the end of 80s, this was not true for the Soviet Union. So postmodernity had a totally different possibility to develop strangely. Yeah? Or public sphere, and there might be even, I'm sometimes saying that this explosion of public space in the late Brezhnev and early after Brezhnev years, this enormous building industry of public space and public buildings for pioneers and whatsoever, was kind of a neurotic ideological response to that what people really wanted, namely to consume properly. Yeah? So that was the answer, and the answer was a false answer because of the ideology of public space was as hollow as it was in the West. Yeah? It was not a free public space, it was a totally governed public space, but it was give ideology a display because we cannot fulfill the consumer needs, so we ideologically play around public space or whatsoever, monuments. Yeah. So I think there is a lot of stories to tell around these issues, and there is an issue of monument protection. That's why we are doing that, more or less. But I think it's in good hands with local researchers already, in almost everywhere one goes. Yeah? That was not the case like when we started it. We really kept archives alive, we collected archives in, we did that. But I think that's more an issue of an international an international movement that is anyway coming up with this brutalism protection programs and so on. But brutalism is more formally keeping brutalism. I try to reconsider at least to reconsider some ideas of the other city that are embedded in that project as well. Okay?
I wanted to ask, if I'm doing a practice, how can I find people that maybe in the world doing the same work as I'm doing? Is there, you have better
abilities than the generations before you. Mm-hmm. Because of the generations before you, or you have worse abilities, I would say. The generation before you was relying to already edited things, yeah? Be it magazines, be it exhibitions, whatsoever, yeah? So you relied to something that was already edited, printed. Well, there has been mail art, but that was a very exclusive network as well. There has been exchange of letters and so on. But you really can find it in the net. Just look around it, look around it, look around it. On the other hand, it is a trap because if you find a lot of similarities and you cannot judge them properly. So it's always good to look for editorial, edited things. I mean, you're having some pages here that are good, that having good editorial. You find international some pages that you can trust and that are having good editorials, and where you can at least think that there is already something formatted and edited out of the big world of images that is around you. I think you can find. It is more open than when I was young, but on the other hand, it is much more complicated because of it is opaque and yeah. But I don't have a clue for that. I don't have a pass. I cannot say go to the goldsmiths and listen to their lectures or look at exhibitions. I think you have to do it yourself. That's the other burden of the times that we are living in. But you can trust certain groups, you can trust certain editorials, and you can trust certain pages to give you a good guidance, and then you find your way along. But I don't have a clue for that. I don't have a recipe. I don't want to give recipes at all. It's just I understand that it is complicated. Yeah. And that comes back to the beginning of my lecture when I was talking about the disbalance of systems that is still existing, though we all have the idea that we are in a globalized world where everything is feasible and achievable. It is still matters where you are. There is a very nice small book of Gatvatore Spivak and Judith Butler against globalism, and it's about the passport. Yeah? And what it means to have a passport, and that the passport matters. So it is an anti-nationalist book about a national tool. And I think it is good to read because of a lot of things that are in debate on that 40 pages or so. Thank you.